Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into some really fascinating research. It's all about how you can predict with startling accuracy whether a team is going to succeed or completely fail just by listening to them argue for 15 minutes.
I know, right? Can a 15-minute argument really predict a team's failure months in advance? It sounds almost crazy. But what if there's like a hidden language in our arguments that tells a much bigger story about our future? Well, this research says yeah, that a tiny emotionally charged sample of how a team interacts can predict their success with, honestly, stunning accuracy. So, let's talk about the big mystery of team success. For decades, researchers have been banging their heads against a wall trying to solve this. Predicting team performance is, well, it's incredibly difficult. We all know teamwork is crucial, right? But what's the secret sauce? What actually makes a team click? That's been the million-dollar question.
Despite years and years of study, the evidence on what makes a team perform well is kind of all over the place. We've always known that conflict can hurt teams, especially when it gets personal and nasty. But beyond that, the specifics have been super murky. The research has been really inconsistent. It leaves us with this big question. What should we even be looking at? What are we supposed to be measuring?
Okay, so where do we find a clue? Well, the breakthrough idea here comes from a completely different field. Get this, marriage counseling. Yep, it turns out the way people handle conflict with their romantic partners, that holds a really powerful key. And here's the thing that's so fascinating. Researchers studying married couples, they've been way more successful at predicting long-term outcomes. And it turns out it wasn't about what couples fought about. It was all about how they fought. They were focused on the emotional dynamics of the argument itself. Yeah, and the pioneer in this field, a researcher named Dr. John Gottman, found he could predict divorce with, wait for it, 93% accuracy. 93%. And the most incredible part, he did it by analyzing just 15 minutes of a couple's argument. Just 15 minutes. So this powerful idea has a name. It's called thin slicing. The theory is pretty simple, really. It says that a short, authentic sample of behavior, it's not just a random snapshot. It can actually reveal these deep, stable, underlying patterns that predict what's going to happen in the long run. We're talking weeks or even months down the line. Right. So the big question became, could this same method work for professional teams? To find out, the researchers got clever. They developed this special protocol to create a realistic, emotionally charged conflict right there in the lab. Think of it like an espresso shot of a team's real-world conflict style. And here's how they did it, with this really clever three-step process. First, each team member, on their own, listed out their biggest disagreements with the team. Then, the whole group got together to discuss those lists and pick the one issue that caused the most friction. And finally, they were given just 15 minutes to discuss that hot-button issue and try to work towards a solution, all while the cameras were rolling. So, what did they find? Let's get into it. The first major thing they looked for was just the overall emotional vibe of the team during that 15-minute argument. Was the conversation generally positive, or was it just overwhelmingly negative? Okay, so this has a technical name. It's called Group Affective Balance, or GAB for short. And the key idea here is really important. It's not about getting rid of negativity completely. Conflict is natural, right? It's about making sure that the positive interactions, things like showing you're listening, a bit of humor, genuine interest, that those significantly outweigh the negative ones. You need a surplus of positivity, even when you're arguing. And check this out. This is where the power of GAB really shines. In the first study, this one single factor, just the balance of positive to negative vibes, explained 35% of the difference in team performance 2.5 months later. Think about that, 35%. That is a huge amount of predictive power from one single, short conversation. But wait, it gets even better. Or, well, more powerful anyway. The second study uncovered something even more specific. It wasn't just about the general vibe anymore. The researchers zoomed in on a handful of behaviors that are just incredibly toxic to teamwork and super predictive of failure. Now, in that marriage research we talked about, these are famously known as the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Yeah, seriously, because they're so destructive. You've got contempt, which is basically mockery and disrespect. Then there's criticism, which isn't about an action, it's an attack on someone's character. then defensiveness, which is really just a fancy way of saying you're shifting the blame, and finally, stonewalling. That's when someone just shuts down completely. The researchers lumped all of these together into a category they called hostile affect. So the researchers went back to the tapes and meticulously coded everything. They were counting every single instance of these toxic behaviors. The eye rolls, the sarcasm, the finger pointing, the moments when someone just completely checks out. So how much did this stuff actually matter? Well, the result was staggering. Get this, a model that included this hostile affect predicted the team's objective performance. We're talking their actual final project grade 6 months in advance with up to 91% accuracy. 91%? Let that sink in for a second. A 15-minute argument they had in, say, February could predict their final grade in August. It's just incredible. To make this super real for you, here's an actual quote from one of the low-performing teams. One person was trying to explain why they missed a deadline, and another team member just shot back with this. This one line, it is just dripping with contempt. It's a perfect gut punch example of the exact toxic behavior that predicted that team was going to fail. And this chart right here, this is basically the smoking gun. It visualizes everything perfectly. You can see this super clear, dramatic trend. As the number of these hostile behaviors, the eye rolls, the contempts, all of it, as that number goes up during that 15-minute chat, the team's objective performance, their actual grade, just absolutely plummets. Okay, so what does this all mean for us in the real world? This isn't just some interesting academic paper. It's a powerful new way of looking at the dynamics of every team we're a part of, whether that's at work, in a class, or even, a personal project with friends. So here are the key takeaways. First, it's not if you fight, it's how you fight. Second, a few of these super toxic behaviors are way more damaging than just general negativity. Third, these patterns, they show up early and they stick around. And maybe most importantly, just being aware of this stuff is the first huge step to actually improving a team's emotional dynamics. A team's success might really hinge on its ability to manage these tiny, moment-to-moment emotional interactions during a fight. So, what are the hidden emotional patterns on your team? This research basically gives us the tools to start looking. The next time your team has a disagreement, just pay attention. Notice the balance of positive and negative. And definitely be on the lookout for those 4 horsemen. Because what this research shows is that those little patterns, they aren't just noise. They might actually be writing the story of your team's future.